Very, very happy to introduce Grant Lee from EVR Studios. He's going to take us through volumetric capture for joint skin facial animation. Over to you, Grant.
Yes, sir. Check. 1, 2, 3. Can you hear me? Okay, cool. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for showing up at such an early hour. You early birds deserve extra kudos, and hopefully I could provide something interesting and helpful to most of you. My name is Grant, and I work as a technical director at EVR Studio in Seoul, Korea. Company intro. EVR Studio is a relatively new startup, specializes in digital human technology and using in-house developed volumetric capture device for scanning 3D characters. We also have a team dedicated to producing visual special effects for films. Additionally, we also develop console and online games. Here are some footages from the game we've been working on for the past couple of years. Houdini generated buildings here, procedural generated. Houdini vertex animated texture used in this thing. So this latest video capture was taken from demo running on PlayStation 5. Our game also features an expansive city landscape taking place in the rural streets of Seoul. To create the massive city environment efficiently, we designed a procedural city generation tool called CityGen, using Houdini and OpenStreetMap data. The buildings shown in this clip are real buildings in a district in Seoul, and they were procedurally generated using Houdini digital asset and Unreal Engine. A unique feature that distinguishes CityGen over other building generation tools is the ability to create any type of building, regardless of shape and style. However, today I won't be focusing on the procedural city generation, which is nothing new to the Houdini community, and certainly not the main topic of this presentation. Everything in this scene is generated using procedural building generation using Houdini. Okay, so that wraps up for the company intro. Today, I will be covering two key topics. First, I'll talk about the automated procedural Topo-Transfer, which converts scanned raw data sequence into clean topology sequences. Then I'll delve into the procedural joint skin generation, which converts blend shapes or a limbic sequence created by the Topo-Transfer into joint skin-based mesh and animation. To capture the facial geometry, we designed and built an in-house volumetric capture studio from scratch. Everything from programmable LED lighting, mirrorless camera setups, and custom rig was made from mostly off-the-shelf parts. And here is our CEO, Mr. Kim, getting his face scanned. You've probably seen raw scan data mesh before. The raw scan results in each frame having different topology, UV layout, and an enormous number of polygons and unwanted noise, making it unsuitable for production purposes. We want to convert the scan shape into the clean topology shown on the right. There are two well-known methods for retopology. The popular 3D third-party app called RAP40 is shown here. The process typically involves working with hand-drawn dots on the model and telling the program what to do with those dots, usually done in 2D image processing per frame. There is a certain amount of automation in the process. However, the automation only comes after many hours of laborious preparation and man-hours. We wanted to mitigate this long and tedious process as much as possible. Houdini offers a very powerful topology transfer node called Topo-Transfer, along with Topo landmark node as shown in the tutorial clip taken from the side effects site. Topo-Transfer requires inputs known as the landmarks. You can interactively mark the landmarks as shown in the tutorial, or you can pass as input arguments pre-generated landmarks. Our automated Topo-Transfer will rely on the Topo-Transfer node with procedurally generated landmarks. Instead of marking dozens of black dots, the method used by the previously mentioned third-party app, we stuck 19 strategically placed stickers of two colors, blue and green, as primary landmarks. We also painted eyeliners on the eyes and blue-colored lip paint to identify the detailed landmarks. More on the detailed landmarks later. The positions of the dots were determined so that even in the most extreme facial expression, the topology of the polygon formed by the points stays consistent. The scan data bakes the marker dots into vertex color, eliminating the need to process the texture data and reducing extra complexity. We could also use an already existing scan mesh by vertex color painting over it the special landmarks. The primary marker dots, baked into each point as color attributes, are first converted to HSV space to extract the positions. This shows the primary landmarks represented by white dots. The primary landmarks are positioned so that most extreme facial expressions and asymmetry do not ruin the mesh polygon topology formed by the landmarks. The topology of the landmark polygon is important because we need to pass either consistently ordered landmarks or uniquely named landmarks to the Topo-Transfer node. The Topo-Transfer node is powerful. However, unless you provide it with good many number of landmarks, it leaves a lot of details behind and sometimes results in incorrect transfer. In this case, if we just ignore the loss of detail for now, only using the primary landmark seems to be working fine. However, when the facial expression gets more intense, we start to see incorrect results. In this one, Topo-Transfer confused the top part of the teeth to be part of the lip, and also results in deformed lip end where it meets the cheek. This one shows the scan data eyes are completely closed. However, in the Topo-Transfer, eyes are only halfway closed. Similar to the previous one, teeth are mistaken as part of the lip, the eyes are also not completely closed. Here, overall crease details are pretty much lost. This led to the necessity of detailed landmarks. Mouth detail landmarks are extracted from the painted area of the lip. Using the primary mouth landmarks, dots marked green, only the mouth area is kept, and the rest of the geometry is removed. RGB is converted to HSV to further filter out unwanted primitives. More processing is done to remove the noise, and a cleaned up mesh of the lips is generated. Some intermediate steps involved in making a clean trace of the lip shape is shown here. However, simply procedurally making a trace outline of the lip geo results in a problem as shown next. The resulting topo-transfer sequence shows unwanted twist of the lip. This necessitates not only the correct shape of the lip outlines, but also the consistent topology across the sequence, with the correct order of points, using the primary landmarks marking the surrounding points for the mouth. We can bisect the trace around the mouth. We then resample the points separately on the top and the bottom portions. This ensures consistent landmark topology. The detailed landmark of the eyes is done the same way. First, isolate the eye area using the primary landmark. Perform RGB to HSV and Vex. In dealing with the noise in the eye scan trace, I found it the easiest to use convex hull node. Perform the usual remove shared edges. And in the same way as the mouth, bisect the eye into top and bottom sections and perform the resample. This leads to consistent eye landmark topology. A simple algebra enables point generation for the lip thickness as well as the inside of the mouth. The more landmarks we have, the better topology results. Here is how the landmarks look on top of the scan data sequence. And here are the landmarks marked with corresponding names. Since the landmark topology stays consistent, the landmark name stays consistent. Procedurally generated inside mouth details are also shown. The landmarks are then matched by their names with the predefined landmarks on our target user input topo mesh template. Since we have a predefined topology, making the landmarks is a trivial task. The topo-transfer node takes 4 arguments. First, topo mesh. Second, the scan mesh. Third, landmarks from the topo mesh. And the fourth, landmarks from the scan mesh. Of course, because everything is procedural, one added bonus is that the topo mesh can be subdivided before the transfer, which results in even greater detail on the transferred mesh. The right figure shows low-res mesh with normal map baked from the subdivided topo-transfer. And here is a result of the topo-transfer performed on the sequence of scan mesh. Here is the same transfer mesh compared to the actual camera shot of our company CEO. Note that there is quite a bit of jittering going on, which is a byproduct of the volumetric capture not resulting perfectly consistent scan per frame. The jitter motion requires a stabilization post-processing on top of the finished topo transfer. We wanted to make the head and back of the neck to be stationary, so the attachment to the rest of the body rig is easily done. This required figuring out the pivot of the head would be, and then translate the mesh by the offset amount between the first frame and the rest. Secondly, it required angle rotation offset to account for any non-linear movement of the head. Finally, after the main transformation has been stabilized, Houdini node smooth motion is called for fine detail motion smoothing. Here is the result of the before and after the motion stabilization. This is all good. However, what we still have is a big cache of mesh data sequence, which takes up many gigabytes of cache data for just few seconds of animation. We need to make this data cache into joint skin-based animation in order to run in a game engine. That leads us now to move on to the second part of the session, that is to convert the topo-transferred mesh data sequence into animated joint skin mesh procedurally using Houdini and Houdini Engine. For skinning the face, we wanted to completely eliminate the need for weight painting in Maya. We also needed more flexibility in terms of dynamically controlling the number of joints and the number of influences according to different face types and facial expressions. And this sounded like an ideal job for Houdini. The first task was to group different areas of the face according to the density of the joints required for that particular area. For example, the area around eyes and mouth require a lot more joints to cover the complex facial expressions, whereas the nose, jaws, and ears don't require as many. The grouping enables user-controllable parameters for joint density per different areas of the face. This clip shows color representation of joint density per area, user-controllable. Actual joint creation is done in two stages. The first is to use the Remesh node. There's a special attribute you can pass to the Remesh node parameter, mesh size attribute. Points belonging to the groups defined previously each have float attribute target mesh size according to the user set ratio parameter converted into unit size. Also note that I have removed the head and ear area before passing it to the remesh. Points for the head and ears area are calculated separately. The remesh node polys is then passed on to PolyReduce node. This enables control of the total point joints per face by setting the reduction amount parameter to the output point count. PolyReduce also takes a special attribute that sets the density per attribute. Joints are represented by the point cloud generated from the remesh and PolyReduce. Note that at this point, each point is given joint name according to the group it belongs to. I named each joint by group name _ nearest point number. The bone capture proximity node is then used to give skin weight and influence per joint point. Certain areas are split into different capture nodes to disable capture to unwanted regions. For example, we do not want the upper lip joints to influence the lower lips, vice versa. The same goes for the upper and lower eyelids as well. As shown here, I've split the bone capture proximity nodes into 6 different nodes, namely upper lip, lower eyelids, lower lip, upper eyelid, upper lip, and upper eyelids can all be combined into one. The rest of the most facial area except for the stationary head, ears, and spine. Even though we will eventually have a single joint for the head, neck, and spine area, we have to create temporary joints for those areas as single joints will not be able to correctly capture the desired area. The bone capture proximity node creates special attribute arrays called bone capture region, which represents the bones that influence the point. and bone capture weight, which defines the weights of the particular bone. These are special attributes and cannot be used as is unless you unpack them with capture attribute unpack node. When you pass the bone capture proximity data onto capture attribute unpack node, you get new detail attribute called bone capture pcap data and bone capture pcap path, which puts the bone names and their influence weight on a more manageable one-dimensional array. Since we have all the bone names and weights in the detail attributes, we can now merge them into a single node with simple vex code that appends bone indices and weights into the subsequent nodes. And we have the proximity capture on the entire face without unwanted influences. We then reverse the capture attribute unpack with capture attribute pack node. Using the smooth node with bone capture as the attribute smooths out the weight influences. Capture node, the capture correct node lets you set the number of bone influences per point. Capture attribute unpacked is called once more to obtain smoothed and numbered bone weight and bone indices per point to prepare for the data that will be used later in Maya. You can certainly export Houdini joint skin mesh as FBX. However, we wanted to be able to generate joint skin interactively in Maya as a Houdini digital asset. This required a bridge between Houdini attributes and attributes that Maya could natively understand. So what I did was to make a Python module that dumps a JSON file with joint names index table. Then each point with its influence joints and their weights are then converted to UV2, UV3, UV4, UV5, UV6, and so on. Also, the point color attribute was baked with joint index as its position. The position is later determined by Maya script by the actual point position which contains the color, which now prepares us for the Houdini digital asset loaded inside Maya. This is running in Maya. As shown here, you can interactively see the joints being created procedurally when you adjust the target number of joint count. So the HDA takes inputs, neutral topo mesh, and target mesh sequence, which is the Alembic file obtained from part 1 of the presentation. Using the rig pose and bone deform node, now the input mesh is morphed into target mesh sequence using the bones to transfer the points. Since this is Houdini digital asset, we can also procedurally subdivide the input topo mesh. Special debug mode lets the user compare between the Alembic sequence and the bone-driven mesh. Here, the greater the discrepancy between the two, the redder it gets. We can also see the virtual joints on the bone mesh. Again, being a Houdini digital asset, the user can adjust the joint count and see the result immediately. Note that the bone density of different areas of the face can be set individually. For example, you can dedicate more detail to the mouth and eyes rather than the nose and jaws, etc. You could also interactively see the result of increasing or decreasing the number of bone influences per joint. Sorry. Yeah, I think so. Our rigger also requested that he may be able to add or remove joints on top of the procedurally generated joints. So this was done by having another input mesh called joint proxy mesh, which lets the user hand paint the joints on the proxy mesh, which then gets reflected on the Houdini digital asset. Here is a result of how joint skin mesh compares to the original Olympic file. And how increasing the number of joints results compared to the relatively low joint count. 927 joints on the left and 1,830 joints on the right. And finally, here is how everything turned out running the asset in Unreal Engine.
Hi everyone, my name is Jae-Hwan Kim, CEO of EVR Studio. Today I would like to share the first news about Project Eden, which is being actively developed in our studio. Project Eden is a creative platform where K-pop artists, digital humans, and conversational AI converge and unite. The boundaries of entertainment will be redefined in Eden, where the artistry of K-pop and the amazing abilities of AI come together. Our developers can create K-pop artists' unique facial expressions and voices in real time by combining cutting-edge technology and creative ideas, just like my face. Additionally, Project Eden will provide a livelier experience by integrating with various conversational AIs, such as ChatGPT and Bard. Through Project Eden, K-pop fans around the world will experience emotional exchanges and creative ideas through conversations with digital K-pop artists. EVR Studio will be introducing Project Eden soon, so please look forward to it. I hope you're as excited as we are to witness a new world of emotional interaction with Project Eden. Thank you.
So that wraps up my presentation, and if you have any questions and answer, I'll be happy to answer any questions. Thank you. Yes, sir.
Check.
Did you use any of the libraries like DemBones or anything like that to do the transfer process for the weighting, or was that your own process?
We did not use any of the libraries that you mentioned.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Hello. What are your plans in terms of like capturing eye movements?
Capturing eye movement.
Yeah.
To tell you the truth, the eye movements in this particular scene was animated by the rigger, by the animator. But I do plan to procedurally animate the eye movements as well in the future. I haven't thought in detail on how I would do it, but somehow I will be able to figure it out. Yeah, but this was definitely done by the animator.
Other questions?
Sure.
You talked a bit about the skin weights. What about the joint positions? Can you tell a bit how that was calculated?
Joint positions, I went through that in my presentation, and that was done through Remesh and PolyReduce.
So those joints were just constrained to the surface?
Yes, yes, yes. I first considered using scatter, but it didn't work as I expected, but where was that? PolyReduce worked pretty well. Basically, yes, yeah. This is the position of the joints, and it was determined by first remeshing the mesh, and then applying PolyReduce on that, and just use the points based on the PolyReduce.
Great, thank you.
Did I answer your
Yes,
question?
perfect.
Hey, thanks for the presentation. I have a question. When you send information to Maya, do you have a hit in performance? And if so, did you do something to reduce, or is something that you were not?
I'm sorry, what about the performance?
When sending the information from Houdini to Maya using
Yes.
the game Houdini Engine,
Yeah.
does it has a difference in performance between how do you see things in Houdini compared to Maya?
Yeah, it definitely is a bit slower running the Houdini engine in Maya. I did notice that. Yeah. And especially when the number of joints gets large, definitely there is slowdown. So in the video, there is a bit of a fast forwarding going on and played at 3 or 4 times the speed.
Are the joint positions going to be the same between capture sessions for the skeleton that is ultimately exported?
Joint session really ultimately joint positions, you mean? Yeah. They're derived from the PolyReduce node the Houdini provides, so it could be different per all the different capture datas.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't have control over that. Houdini does. Seems to be working well though.
Hey, thanks for a great presentation. I'm wondering if you considered extending this approach to full body topology transfer. So now you are focusing on the face, but let's say you had the full body.
I'm actually, as I speak, I'm actually experimenting on doing that on full body rigging as well.
Oh, cool.
And ultimate goal is to eliminate the artist from hand painting all the skin weights.
Thanks.
Sure.
Any other questions? Yeah.
Hi. Have you thought about taking the textures from the volume capture and using them in some manner?
Yeah. The volumetric capture also produces texture data. Certainly, we could use that too. But ultimately, I would transfer the texture data and bake it into the point color. That facilitates basically the speed of calculating and going through each point data and figure out what to remove and what to keep. So texture data could be used for some other means, which I'm sure there are some uses for that as well, but I just wanted to maximize the performance, so everything was baked into the vertex data, and scan data has enough mesh count that it's pretty accurate. Just having the vertex color is pretty accurate to having the actual texture data. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I just want to ask about animation control, or
Sure.
the ability to override the performance.
Sure.
At all? Yeah.
Animation control?
Yeah, just the ability to creatively edit the performance. Controls for that type of thing. Considering we're doing everything baked down to individual joints, that's not much you can really animate with. So if you were to try to change the performance, how would you
having an extra rig to control it afterwards?
Yeah.
We have a separate process for that. This does not pertain to that process. We have a separate process that my colleague was presenting at an Autodesk session. And for that session, we have separate facial rig that animators can actually control. But this is just strictly from scan data to the baked animation data.
Since you have the mesh surface, do you consider joint orientation at all, or is that not significant?
I didn't consider joint orientation at all. It frankly it didn't matter which orientation it started with, ended up with. Yeah, basically in Maya, I just moved the positions of the joints and just UV pin everything from the surface, from the blend shape into the joint.
Other questions?
Hi, thank you for sharing this. It's much appreciated. So when you're creating the joints, you're essentially going from a cage to a bunch of points that you then have to bind the mesh to all of those transforms, like 900 to 1800 individual transforms, each with weights to make the skin move.
Yes.
And maybe this is more about the game performance side of things, but did you consider just keeping it at the cage and doing more of like a proximity bind from the cage to drive the mesh rather than going to joints to drive the mesh? Just like a blend shape, basically.
Certainly that could be a possibility. I just wanted to keep it too simple, just joint transformation. And for games, having as low as 450 joint count was good enough. So I didn't consider using any blend shapes along with the joints. It's just strictly joints.
So just a follow-up question. So there wasn't, let's say, Maya doesn't like a lot of individual transforms, right? It performs better doing things as like a single deformation, right? That could be parallelized and stuff. So I guess, I assume you had to store the animation of the joints, right? So you still have to cache those positions?
Yes, basically they're exported as FBX.
And so is that more efficient than just keeping the cache on the...
Oh, absolutely. Having the cache for all these animations results in huge data. Yeah, that was absolutely out of the question for making a plane in the game. So definitely it's way more efficient having the joints instead of the blend shapes.
What kind of software are you using for converting the photogrammetry from capture?
We have, it's my coworker, Metashape.
Okay, great.
Thank you, Jae-wook.
Other questions? Going once, going twice. Thanks very much, Grant. Excellent,
Sure.
excellent.
Thank you.